Good morning, everybody. I guess an announcement is in order first. The conference made a little error in the program and listed we had two sessions. One was going to be on VMware vSphere Labs and the other on VMware View Lab. And so the conference listed only the View. So what we decided to do was just put the two together and do both the same presentation in both sessions. That way, if somebody goes to one or the other, they'll get to see whatever they came to see. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at NDG lab solutions for VMware vSphere and VMware View as part of the VMware IT Academy program. Okay. So first thing we're going to do, introduce myself and then my co-presenter who will be coming on later, talk about VMware virtualization, talk about VMware end-user computing, talk about the lab solutions, have a demonstration, and hopefully also we'll have time to do some hands-on for those that want to, answer any questions, and then wrap things up. Right. So my name is Rick Watson. I'm a senior technical instructor with VMware Education. I'm also the instruction support facilitator for the VMware IT Academy program. With me presenting today is going to be Rich Weeks, who's the president of Network Development Group. We also, at least for a while, have as a guest Kim Yohannan from EMC, the EMC Academic Alliance, who works very closely with us in the educational arena. All right, so first thing, really quickly, we're going to look at and talk about VMware virtualization. The key part of VMware virtualization is something called vSphere. And vSphere is a suite of software that VMware provides. And the key thing it does is in the second bullet item here. It takes your physical resources and aggregates them, lets you not worry so much about the boundaries. For example, if you have 25 servers, and each one of those servers has 2 physical processors, you don't think of that as 25 different machines. You think of that as 50 processors that you can allocate to whatever applications you're running in your environment. That's the kind of capability that vSphere gives you. It also is the foundation for cloud computing, okay? Particularly what VMware and most of the industry defines as cloud computing, which is the hybrid cloud model. Okay, so to understand VMware vSphere, we have to go back and do a little bit of a history lesson. Traditionally, if you were going to deploy an application, you would get a box of some kind, a 1U, rack mount, whatever it is, put an operating system on it, put your application on this. And that box, that application was going to be imprisoned on that physical box for 3, 4, 5 years, maybe longer. So you always had to over-allocate resources so that as time goes by and that application needs more resources, they're going to be there because it's imprisoned on that box. It's really challenging to move it somewhere else. Well, what vSphere lets you do is by installing VMware ESXi on your box, you can run multiple operating systems and multiple applications. And you can also move them from that hardware to other hardware. Now, we do this through what VMware refers to as a virtual machine. A virtual machine is just an instance of an operating system that's running on that particular box. But with VMware vSphere, you can have multiple instances of an operating system, each one independent from the other, different operating systems. You can have Windows, NetWare, Linux, all sorts of different operating systems running on that box. Okay. Now, one of the other things that this lets you do, and it's a technology that we call vMotion, it lets you move that operating system and whatever applications are running from one physical box to another. In the VMware lexicon, we refer to those boxes as hosts. And this is something called vMotion, and it happens with no downtime of that operating system and that application. Now, when I started with VMware almost 8 years ago, this was amazing stuff and brand new. But VMware had been doing it for a couple of years. So a decade later, now our competitors are actually finally starting to catch up with this capability. So, you know, in another 10 years, maybe they'll be caught up with where we are today or so. But anyway, this capability gives you all sorts of other features. Something we call distributed resource scheduling, which lets software move these virtual machines around based on resource need. It also lets you manage power. You can, you know, during low utilization, you can move all of the operating systems and applications off of a physical box and power that off. And when I say you can, the software does this automatically. And then as the workload increases, it powers that box on and moves them back. So we also provide something we call fault tolerance, which if this hardware fails, the virtual machine, this application, will be moved to another piece of hardware with zero downtime. And you say, oh, well, you can do that with clustering. Well, this requires no extra software in the operating system. This is all happening with the VMware software. Okay? But one of the key things that the VMware model lets you do is cloud computing, and what we refer to as vCloud. Now, within your organization, you build what we refer to as a private cloud, because the cloud boils down to the fact that you have mobility. You can move things around. And you partner with one or more providers, like a Verizon, for example, that provides a public cloud. And if you need resources, the same mobility that lets your applications move within your organization lets them move to and from the provider cloud. So let's say that your school gets voted by Time Magazine as, you know, one of the top 10 partner schools in the country, and your enrollment goes way up, right? And your web servers just can't handle all that traffic. Well, they can migrate out to the provider where they get that extra resources, and then when that's over, they can migrate back. Now, this is what VMware and in the industry refer to as a hybrid cloud. One of the big advantages of this is your application doesn't have to live all the time out in the provider's cloud. You can only use those resources when you need them. The application doesn't have to be written to run in that cloud. It can be a standard application that just moves back and forth. A few months ago, Gartner came out with a report on the top 5 technologies that CIOs should be investing in and working with between now and 2015. And hybrid cloud was one of the key ones. Okay? All right, so that's a little bit about vSphere. For those of you that only came for vSphere, this is the bonus. We're going to also talk about VMware end-user computing. Now, VMware end-user computing builds on top of vSphere. So like a lot of our other things that we do, the cloud, the site recovery manager, and so forth, this builds on top of vSphere. Okay? And you're probably all well aware of this, but end-user computing has been changing over the last few years. If you were in Kim's presentation earlier, we talked about BYOD, bring your own device. Also sometimes euphemistically called EOIT, employee-owned IT. What it means is instead of the company providing the device you're using, it's one that you provide. 37% of employees in corporations are doing that. In 2011, the number of shipments of tablets and smartphones exceeded the number of shipments of personal computers. So we're already moving toward a post-personal computer era. Okay? Here's another way to look at it. If you look at enterprise, whether this is commercial, public, whatever, applications, going back to the mid-90s, almost all of them were running on top of Windows. Gartner predicts that by 2020, less than 10% of enterprise applications will be running on Windows. So where are we now? I need to update my, my slide. But in 2011, interestingly, we crossed over the 50% mark. In 2011, only 50% of enterprise applications were running on Windows platform. The other 50% that were in use were OS neutral. Now, this is an evolution, not a revolution. You've got to keep things that you've had working as you transition toward the new paradigm, the OS neutral paradigm. Okay? Well, VMware end-user computing technologies let you do that. Things like VMware View and Horizon and ThinApp and Mirage allow you to do that. We're going to look at particularly View and Horizon right now, and you know, if we get bored or whatever, we might come back and look at some of the other ones like ThinApp and so forth. Okay. What VMware View does is it lets you provide users, whether they're students or employees or whoever, a Windows desktop on any device. So it could be an Android phone or tablet, an iPad, a Mac PC, a thin client, a zero client. So you can provide that, and you control what's on there. And using a protocol that VMware co-develops with a company called Attendees called PC over IP, you get a very efficient and responsive interaction with that desktop. So for example, for students at a university, they can bring whatever kind of device they want, and you can provide them with a Windows desktop that has the applications on it that you want there, that is set the way you want it, locked down, and that you manage. And the same thing, with business. Now, the next step in this is combining View with something called Horizon. So with View providing the desktop service and Horizon providing an application catalog, you can provide any application to any device using HTML5 in a browser. So if you've got a user running an iPad, they can run a Windows application in their browser using VMware View and Horizon. If you got a user using an Android phone, they can do the same thing. So this lets you make that transition, keeping the Windows applications that you're dependent on and you know and love as we transition to that OS neutral world that we're moving toward. So the idea here is that the end user is going to have a consistent experience no matter what device they're using, whether it's a Windows PC or a Macintosh or an iPad or an iPhone or an Android, a consistent experience. Their applications, their files, and they can have access to it from any device, anywhere, anytime. Okay, so that's the VMware technology and where it's going. Let me tell you a little bit about a program that VMware has that lets you get involved in teaching your students about this, the VMware IT Academy program. It's open to any school, degree or diploma school. We don't put a lot of restrictions on you. We don't say you have to commit to teach a certain number of classes or buy a certain number of books or anything like that. We don't say you have to teach it in your classroom. You can use local classes, distance learning, some combination of the two. We don't put a lot of limitations on it. Okay? Now, the idea behind this is that there's value for the school and for the student and VMware. For the school, we give you our software and our courseware to use in your classroom. So intellectual property that took hundreds of millions of dollars to develop, we give it to you to use in teaching. For the student, it gives them access to that knowledge, but also VMware certification. Students that attend a class at a VMware IT Academy school qualify for VMware certifications like VMware Certified Professional that require class attendance. And obviously there's something here for VMware, which is proliferation of our technology. Now when we developed the VMware IT Academy programs, one of our main goals was to minimize costs to the school. And I think we've done a really good job of that because we charge schools nothing to participate in the program. There's no charge, no fee for VMware to participate. But that does mean that the schools have to be very self-sufficient. We provide guidance and documents and procedures, but the school has to follow those. We're also building a number of what we're calling regional academies, kind of following the old Cisco lingo for this, that help other schools get up to speed and going. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, there's no cost to join the program. For courseware, you purchase it directly from VMware Education's printing vendor, and printed books are around $50 US plus shipping. Ebooks under $20, and we even have it arranged for some of the very popular ebooks that the students can purchase them directly. So if your bookstore is a little bit you know, of a nuisance, you can just bypass it and have the students buy the books directly. Same thing for the instructors as well. Students get a discount on the certification exam, so 70% off what the commercial cost is. The students and instructors get access to e-learning. In the case of the students, this helps you know, fill in some of the gaps, give them a chance to refresh on things. For the instructors in the program, they can use this e-learning to qualify for VMware certifications. For example, the VMware Certified Professional certification, the instructor can watch a recorded class, work through the lab environment using lab time that's graciously donated by NDG, and get their VMware certification if they want to have that to teach the classes. One little note here, the e-learning doesn't qualify for any VMware certifications. The VMware certifications that require class attendance, it has to be an instructor-led class. All right, so that's a quick rundown of the technologies and the VMware IT Academy program. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to Rich Weeks of NDG. I got Rich. And let him take you through the lab environment. One important thing about NDG, just in case he doesn't mention it, for VMware IT Academy, there are two ways you can use their lab environment. One way is you can buy the lab environment from them and deploy it, but for some of our courses, like the course that matches up with our VCP certification, the vSphere Install, Configure, Manage course, they also have a hosted solution available. And working with a company called SigmaNet, you can rent, if you will, the lab environment for whatever time your students are going to need to get it. So I'm going to turn things over to Rich now, and I'll be around as well for any questions you might have later on.
First, an apology, because many of you might have saw this in the last session. Some of you might have been at workshops or other events and seen this before, so I apologize for sitting through the same thing. All right, so NetLab is our product offering at NDG Network Development Group, and what we're trying to do is enable academic institutions to put their lab equipment on the internet. So a lot of ICT courses, you know, your administration wants to put them in distance enabled, but what the school will challenge with is when it comes to hands-on, right? They might be able to pass out like VMs, virtual machines, but what becomes the problem is when they try to marry real content to the virtual machines, they find that they really struggle. When they need to inter-network the virtual machines, they also struggle. Now, a question I often get, and I mentioned in the last session, is, well, why don't you just centrally host it for us? Folks that attended the last session don't answer the question, but for those in the room that are new to the session, why don't we centrally host this for everybody? Anybody got thoughts?
Yes. It's going to be a resource pod and an app, but it does give us control over our own environment.
Yes, that's a lot of the good reasons. Any other thoughts on why we don't centrally host a lot of these courses? That's a good one. Yeah. What? There are some identity issues. So if you're going to host for somebody, you might want to look at identity laws because there's potential big issues there, especially if you go international. Any other questions or issues? And we have to think about that, for example, when we authenticate from external LMSs. Okay, software licenses. For example, there's some great vendors in the room right now. I'm going to point out a few, and it might even surprise some. We actually have the Juniper rep in the room. They got a cool product that they actually will host for you, which is really neat. And he'll talk about his session. You might want to go to the session. What time is your session? Yeah, you bet, you bet. Juniper's got a good program. I work with Cisco as a partner, but in academia, what we've learned is the best way to service our customers is all of us to work collaboratively. to the best of our ability. And some of my schools are actually talking to the Juniper folks about putting virtual machines behind our product. So it's no skin off my back to help other vendor programs. Rick's with VMware, as you mentioned. Kim in the back, Kim, EMC storage. If you're teaching Rick's program, you probably don't adopt Kim's program. Why? If your students need storage concepts, Kim's program will teach storage concepts. All right, so what we're doing is giving your lab resources on the internet, and our software is automating access to those lab resources. Now this is how we're doing it. We're taking Cisco Real Gear and we're writing scripts to manage the Real Gear. Now the Cisco Academy has a simulator called Packet Tracer. We are not trying to compete with Packet Tracer. As your students advance into the more advanced programs, we're when you need that real gear, not the simulation, okay? We're also using virtual machines, but it's running on VMware ESXi, and we're using vCenter to automate the scripting process so we can marry those virtual machines with content and inter-network those virtual machines. Okay, that's how we're technically doing it. Our software is talking to the APIs of vCenter. You could actually write software yourself to do these very same things, but what we're trying to do is make it easy in one software package for you, so it does everything for you. Now, there's two versions of our product. AE allows you to have 16 active sessions. That means that I can put you in teams of 2, and then we can have 16 or 32 people, teams of 2, running actively using the lab environment. PE would double that scale, but inactive I could scale to hundreds or thousands. So I can create as many VMs as I need to serve. It's just asynchronously how many sessions I can run simultaneously. Okay? Now, the Cisco courses we support are listed here, but I want to point out ITE uses virtual machines. Cisco's ITE course, we're working with Cisco to add that as an offering for our customers. All right, the EMC storage course, we've got ISM, which teaches basic storage concepts to your students. We can give you access to these labs so you can do it. You can get a book from Kim so you can trial it. We're working on a cloud infrastructure course. We'll teach cloud computing. That'll come out in the summer of 2013. We're working with Cassia.org. They're doing a lot of cybersecurity. We're also working with an ISGTC grant. Julie represents an ISGTC. She's got a session this afternoon that'll go over that. If you're interested in some of the security and other offerings, that grant will support security labs. And you can add your own virtual machines. Now, I'm giving you this background so you've got a feel for all the different things you could do with this virtualized technology that VMware offers with our product. This IP version 6 is a supplemental lab library, as an example. And then we're in discussions with LPI.org. How many of you would love to have a clean, nice, easy Linux offering to help your students get basic Linux skills all the way to advanced Linux skills? You can use the VMware software to deploy that type of solution, and we can show you how to do that. Then Cisco IT Essentials will be supported, and as I mentioned, Julie's working on a grant that's going to do it in 4 different disciplines: GIS, cybersecurity, networking, and then operating systems. Is that the other one? Programming. 16 to 30 courses. All right, now we're here today to talk about VMware, Install, Configure, Manage. This is a virtual topology. Using our product, you could assign these 5 virtual machines to any student that walked into your classroom or any online student, and they can own these virtual machines through the entire process of learning how to become a VMware professional, mapping to the VMware Certified Professional exam. So that's what we're going to talk about real quickly. Now, this course is called Install, Configure, and Manage. VMware vSphere Install, Configure, Manage. If you go to our website, so I can pull up our browser here. If you go to our website, and you click on Content, you click on VMware IT Academy, you'll see a nice little video of Dave Nelson. He's the director of VMware. He'll be here later today, I believe, if you want to speak to Dave. You've got a list of labs and courses that we support. Now notice we've got a lot of different courses up here. Anybody got a good reason why we have all these different lab offerings? What happens in academia? Commercially, they're popping out new versions of software every month, every quarter, new software versions for applications. How quickly can you adopt a new course in your programs? A year, year and a half, 2 years, because you got some of your Department of Education driven at state level, so you got to get it in your syllabus, right? So we're going to support back revisions all the way to ICM 4.1 if you need it. And the latest that just came out, which is ICM 5.1. All this is on our website, netdevgroup.com, including installation guidance that'll tell you how to set this up if you're a NetLab customer today. All you would need to do is click on one of the lab libraries.
list the lab exercises that are part of that library. They're listed here in detail. And then you can get the install guides right off of our website. So it actually tells you how to set up these environments in virtual machines. Now once you set up the environment, and this may be an adventure, guys, because I haven't been on this computer. So Java plugins or whatever may fuss at me. Once I set up the environment one time, I set up my master VMs, our software will help you manage it. So you basically follow our instructions for setting up your virtual machines. You get your virtual equipment pod. Let's just grab one. Let's see here. Let's go VMware ICM pod. All you have to do is click clone, assign it a unique number, and guess what? The system will do all the work for you. It's right now cloning virtual machines. Anybody who's managed a virtual environment is probably kind of salivating right now because it's setting up everything. Virtual networks, virtual machines, and I can start assigning it one student at a time, and you can have it the rest of the semester, all yours. School managed it, the total environment. So that's how easy and quick it is to manage the environment. All you gotta do is click on Clone Pod, and we're off and running. Okay? Any questions about that? Any questions about how we're doing that? Pardon me?
The cost for a student, for each student.
You set this up and it's yours, so there's no cost for your students.
So what is the cost to the school?
The cost of the school, we sell two versions of the product, remember I mentioned earlier? The license for the lower end is $7,000, the higher end is $20,000. But horizontally you can teach about, right now, probably about 16 to 18 courses. By the end of the year it'll be 30 courses.
So how many concurrent students could be logged in?
Okay, 16 active sessions per hour. So if you do the calendar math, in a 10-hour day, that's 160 students that can be served in a day. Asynchronously, if you're serving them, you can get a lot of students over a calendar model. Does that answer your question?
So, well, if I only have one class, $7,000 is too much.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. So why don't you work with a sister school that's hosting it for you? In other words, Julie's got a school, they're going to host it, and they're going to serve other schools. So the license allows you to work collaboratively with other schools. So you can service your whole county, your community, etc. Okay, any other questions? I got more things I'll show you, but any questions pertinent to the administrative? All right. So what I want to do next, I'm going to log into an actual lab environment. So let's see here. Actually, let's go to a different system. This is kind of a cool thing to do because you can get a feel for how a school is using it. This is Fort Hays State University, a four-year university. Notice their branding, their own branding. So they're basically able to brand their setup. I'm going to log into a View client. How many of you would like to be able to teach VMware View? Rick Watson's the only person in the room who wants to teach View? It makes sense that the VMware guy would want to teach it. Okay, this is actually a lab environment at Fort Hays State University to teach the View course. If I click on Show Lab Content, and instead of logging everybody in for sake of time, if we have time later, I'll do that. I'm actually going to walk you through this first lab. So here's the lab topology. Here's the lab settings that I would need. Here is the install View client, the first steps. So log into the View student machine. So I'm going to go over here to the VM student. Click on it. Now Java's going to fuss at me. I only have to do this once. I can tell it to quit giving me these little messages. But since this isn't my personal machine, so we trust it, run. You won't get that messaging again. And what it's doing is connecting over the internet, and I'm off and running on that virtual machine. So this is at Fort Hays State University, and I could start doing the actual lab itself. So I log in as administrator if I wanted to. Let's log in. I can Tight. So it's loading personal settings, and I could start doing the lab exercise. So pretty cool if you think about it. I could actually start doing a View exercise from sitting at my kitchen table at home. I could start learning the VMware View product and the product offering. Okay? So that gives you a quick feel of just accessing the lab environment. Let me go back to my Prezzo here. Oh, wrong one. Let's see. All right. So that's a quick overview for the install, configure, manage. What I want to do is kind of go over the View course. It's what was listed in the syllabus, so let's talk about it real quick. What you've got here is a listing of the actual course overview. So these are the topics that are covered in the actual course. Rick, this is like vSphere, right? So everything's free to the school. The content, the software licenses, they don't have to purchase anything, correct? Okay. All right. Here are the list of labs. There's 18 labs total for the overview course for View. Instead of reading, I'll let you kind of glance over them. Okay. Any questions about this list? Rick, you're certified to teach the View course, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How many of you think you'll teach this class again for Rick and I? You'll raise your hand. Bill? One person? Man, Rick, we did a lot of work for, 3 people? Okay. Will some of you consider it? Yeah? Okay. All right. That's good. All right. Here's the chapter to lab matrix. So obviously you're teaching in the classroom, so you've got to map the content to actual lab exercises. So this gives you a list of the actual chapters in the material, and then the lab exercise that maps to it. Okay. Now here's the pod topology that we'll start out with for the course. This is what will be presented to the student. Remember that automation I showed you? You create the master one time. So your lab manager, whoever's managing your lab environment, creates this master once. Then you clone it, and then each of you can be assigned your own pod. And then you just schedule lab time. That's straightforward. Okay? Now here's the pod requirements. This is how much storage and RAM you would eat up. Okay? So you need to be thinking about these types of resources. Here's the next topology that will be needed, and this is getting into the nested hypervisors. Does anybody know what I mean by nested hypervisors? Go for it, Rick.
It's the VMware ESXi hypervisor running inside a virtual machine on an ESXi server.
Okay, remember when I had the drawing up there and I showed real servers? So what we're going to do is run virtual machines that we're going to assign to your students. Then your students are going to run virtual machines inside of the virtual machines you assign them. So they're going to create more virtual machines. So after a while, it can become a 3-dimensional Rubik cube where virtual machines are running internally to virtual machines. Now, that sounds like it's a little scary, right? Because if you're brand new to IT and we put you on this environment and we don't teach this material to you as a new student, you could very easily get lost in a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional rat hole as you're clicking down, right? So we want to go back to those lab libraries as we look at this. And we want to teach the concepts and kind of introduce them to what we're doing. Now, why is this important? Why is the View course important? Anybody got any thoughts about that? How many of you see cloud computing as like the bright future and everybody's going to deploy cloud? Everybody, right? All right, how many of you have data centers in your community? Raise your hand if you got a data center in your community. Okay, how many of you don't have data centers in your community? All right, there's a lot of folks out there that are teaching at community colleges or community areas where your students are getting good jobs on Microsoft training or that general cert where they go out in the industry, right? Well, if you go and you teach them cloud computing and there's no data center in their environment, have you done them a real service? Maybe, maybe not. Depends, right? Right? Because as bring your own device starts to grow, right, and clouds as a service, they may have to go to where a data center is to get a job. Well, why is that not the case for something like View? What is View? View is VDI, Virtual Desktop Implementation. So if you've got a business in your community, more than likely over time they're going to get services from the cloud, or they're going to deploy a VDI environment, correct? And that VDI environment is where your student has a good chance of getting employment. That's why View, courses like VDI offered through View, could be a big deal for a lot of community colleges and universities if your students want to stay localized. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So let's go back and look at that real quick. So here is the nested hypervisor pod topology that we were going to build. Now let's look at our software dependencies for this View course. Now, if you were in our last session, we went over a cloud computing course where we taught storage concepts and virtualization concepts. In this course, because we're doing VDI, we're going to look at a lot of operating system software, OSs, and then we're going to run some software applications on top of those OSs. Well, what do we got to do? We got to have licenses for all of those VMs and software applications. And that usually is where your challenge starts to run into for your ICT courses. So as you look through this, we're trying to give you a feel for what you've got to license. Now, notice most of the things we're trying to license you can get from your Microsoft programs. Microsoft has really good programs to get you licenses. And now VMware is going to offer all these software applications also. And we will provide you step-by-step guidance for how to set up the course. Okay? So if you map each lab exercise, you see over here the software dependencies that are going to have to be put in place. But what's the cool thing? You don't have to do this once, and then each semester you teach it, you just clone it, assign it to a student. So the software does the work for you. Okay? Here's the first lab. Here's the concepts we're going to learn in the first View lab. I'll let you kind of view over that. So we're introducing the students to some licensing and how to actually install ESXi, how to install View. Okay. Then we're going to put the agent on the desktops, right? You got to have a way to get that client onto each desktop that's going to use it. Okay. And then we're going to clone, start getting into cloning. Now, anybody got an idea why we want to use XP when we do a lot of these labs? Julie? Great, Julie, right on the money. So a lot of operating systems are getting RAM, bloated. They eat up a lot of virtualization memory. So you want to scale to a lot of students, right? And you only have a few servers. The more RAM you eat up, the less students you can serve. The other problem is disk space. Over time, software gets bloated, it eats up more storage space. So we're going to try to figure out every way possible and every trick possible to stretch our resources as far as possible to scale as many students as possible. And that's why we're using XP. Now I point that out because a lot of schools will go, well, XP, you can't get it anymore. Well, actually you can. It's just you don't traditionally want to use it because students are going to use it in the marketplace. But for teaching these concepts, there's no real disadvantage. Okay? Yeah. Okay. All right, so this is where we're actually going to get into kind of installing the client and connecting to a virtual desktop. And then we're going to install and use a virtual printer. Printers are still around. They're still going to need them, so we're going to kind of teach the printing management. Then we're going to modify global settings, get into kind of managing user rights, administration rights. As you kind of go through this, it might also kind of almost feel like managing operating systems. If you think about it, it's kind of what we're doing. Because again, virtual desktop deployments. So we get into role-based delegation and administration. Installing View Composer on a system. So we're getting into a lot of the details that will enable your student to actually do this in the workforce. How much time we got? We got about 10 minutes. So I'm going to go through this really fast. Does anybody want to do a lab? You might have to stay through your lunch. You're welcome to do that. Bill, are you going to let them do these VMware labs in your session or just storage? Okay. Bill's got a hands-on session where the whole hour is going to be all it is labs, right? Or, no?
No, very short. I'm going to have a very short
a short window. Oh, okay, all right. So Bill's got a session where he's going to do storage labs, so you can look at that online, and we're going to use NetLab to do that. Anyone in the room that wants to do these labs, whether it's storage, virtualization with vSphere, or the View, we'll give you access so you can do the labs. You can go to our website and ask for it, or you can get my business card. And again, for time, what we'll do is we'll just kind of go through these quickly. That gives you a feel for the lab library. And that's where we're down to, doing a lab. So what I'll do is open it up for questions, because obviously we're not going to have time to do a lab unless you stay for your lunch.